The waste for the coffee pots.
Right, okay, we're back live. Do we have a quorum, please?
Yes.
We do. Councillor Woodcock was the next who wanted to speak, but he's just disappeared on us. We'll come back to him. So we're still on the topic of refuse and recycling. So I welcome further contributions.
Yes. Just to waffle on for a minute and give everybody a chance to return. With the rubbish and recycling, as part of our waste and management plan, there will be a big focus on education for the community around how to manage their waste better, starting with refuse, reduce, reuse, and then down to recycle. So hopefully that the overall use of having to dump things, the intention is that would reduce over time.
Councillor Woodcock.
Half the team here. I'm sort of with Melissa about this price of the bags thing. I know there's associated costs and everything else that go with it. What concerns me a lot is the fly tipping situation as these prices go higher and higher. Now, I look at, I seriously think there's something wrong with that contract. I look at what I pay for a wheelie bin from a private company compared to what people are paying in their rates for their rubbish, and it's horrendously more expensive for the ratepayer to do it through their rates than it is for me to do it privately for a wheelie bin company. So it seems like there is a horrendous discrepancy somewhere between contracts and other companies that you can actually get this done for. So I think the main thing we should be focusing on, our main thing, is looking at this contract with our refuse and waste very seriously about finding out why it's so expensive compared to other options.
Evan, I was going to invite you to talk next, and if you could tell us when the current contract comes to an end, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that the youth care contract, which is also consolidated contract across the region, is not due for renewal for another couple of years. It is the subject of Section 17A review at the moment, so we simply can put questions like Councillor has raised into the mix, and I'm sure they will be considered, because that's part of the Section 17A review, which is a cost implication review. I would just point out though that the councillors' comments about other commercial contracts being very much cheaper than council collection, in my experience, you know, I live in a rural area and I use the largest private commercial provider to pick up my rubbish, which is where I pick up, and they charge me more than it would cost me to pay the $260 on to in my rates, pay for my yellow bags. I think that I'm sorry, I'm not disputing what you're saying. You might have a different experience with me, but I think that needs to be the subject of an evaluation. Chair.
Well, look, I will add some information to your whatever. You might remember Janice just referred to the fact that she had found a way to get her rubbish picked up that was cheaper than using the council system. Now, I've used that alternative system for some time. And here's the thing, it's nothing to do with different companies, because it was the same company that picks up my yellow bins. Picks up my yellow bins and my yellow bags. So it's to do with the nature of the service. It's cheaper to provide a service that picks up a wheelie bin using an automatic because we get out of your truck. But anyway, it is considerably cheaper for me to use that, pay my rates for the rubbish bags than it is to buy the rubbish bags. And what's more, it's just got vastly cheaper
Again,
when we adopt this rule. But the other thing, the big thing I think possible about the wheelie bin is it stops dumping plastic rubbish bags into wherever, because that wheelie bin that I got, whenever it was, when the service first started about 6 years ago. It's still perfect. Will last another 6 years.
Yeah, I haven't seen a flight to Deliberations around.
Funny.
But you're correct, like,
That's my view, is that what we should be doing is actually buying what doesn't cost anything, getting the red bins for everybody, saving everybody money.
yeah, and that's the thing, so the $4.90 per bag, I pay $3.50 for my wheelie bin, and I'd get 3 bags in that quite easily. So, and like you say, there isn't those 3 bags going in rubbish as well.
It's win-win. Anyway, that's why I was hoping the contract might come to an end quite quickly, so we can, but there may be modifications.
Yeah, and I believe that some of what comes from the councils actually helps to be able to give those lower prices for the private consumer as well. Because you know, being the one company but still having to make the trips to Bonnie Glen and all of those types of things are all considered, and so that's, I guess, the power of being able to have it under the one at the same time, right? So being able to help in that respect.
Thanks, Mayor Martin. Just in relation to this discussion, I can certainly remember back to the last triennium when the contract was let. And at the same time, or within a week or 2 weeks after the contract being let with council, the same company was starting to put the flyers through the letterboxes offering that service for the wheelie bins at a cheaper rate and comparably. And certainly the mayor at the time was quite agitated that council had just let their tender or contract to that company, and then that company was coming in and offering a different service with the wheelie bins at a cheaper rate. So yeah, certainly be interesting to see how that 17A review goes through, Stefan.
All right,
I can see people used to.
Mr. Mayor, just on another note, like Aidan's saying there, I personally can't see why, and it could be a combined council thing. Council don't have their own staff running the rubbish dumps and that, and it's just a matter of the wheelie bins and that stuff picking up. So it's like almost like 2 separate contracts, but you're actually running the dumps and that with your own staff. It could be another option, just keep things in the house, but it's just a thought.
Any other thoughts on, as well, those core things that everybody thinks to agree that council should provide? But Janice was just telling me before that in the far north, it's not a council service. Everybody's on the Stefan service.
In the country, that's what we are. We don't rely on council to pick up our rubbish. We have to pay for the service from a private contractor.
It's our contract.
No, not with our contractor.
Yeah, but rurally.
Yeah, I'm in the country.
Of course, Chair, it's not mandatory. Any private citizen can retire the balance or whatever and get a private service and take it off their rates. This is a personal choice that people make, and they're not restricted at all, Chair.
Well, so you can actually get it removed from your rates. The fortune if you get.
Sorry, no, you're wrong, because the rating component pays for the rubbish collection in the town of the town bins and the sweeping and all that. The rubbish bags pay for your rubbish. Sorry, Charlie, before you jump in there.
That's it.
So it turns out that the ideal length of a one break is 25 minutes.
Especially when on staff meeting.
We might have a little coordination. Okay, so we'll move now to housing for seniors, and can I come back to you, Janice, please?
So there's a proposed $10 per week increase on those, which is an 8% increase, considering the increasing costs that we have in operating those. We understand that there is a balance to be met with keeping the expenses stable, but an 8% increase is what has been proposed. And I believe that's mainly because people find it easier to deal in
$10
round figures.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Seem,
Yes, sorry.
sorry, it seems to strike a comfortable balance. Yeah, $10 isn't a huge amount, but for those on a very limited income, it will make an impact on them. And I certainly wouldn't want to see it any greater in this capacity. But I would hope that the burden is not too much.
I hope councillor Old is going to repeat that. I'll repeat it. Comment at this point.
No, I'm just actually curious to know what the cost of providing that service to our senior citizens actually is compared to what we actually charge, because the burden falls on the ratepayer across the entire district. So if we're not trying to do cost recovery in our housing for seniors, why are we in the business? So,
I think possibly another related question is, this was one of the things we discussed last time, financial policy. Does the proposed fee meet what our financial policy expected?
It still will be at the lower end. It's an aspiration to achieve that percentage, but we adjusted the percentages in the rating of the You remember that the original aim was to achieve 80%.
That's the one.
Yeah, and that was considered, you would have had to have put the rate significantly in order to achieve that. So we moderated that private income percentage.
So to just summarise councillor Old's off repeated point at this point, other pensions will be subsidising.
so we're not a community housing provider, therefore we don't attract any level of subsidy from central government. And this is right across New Zealand in terms of local government and those housing providers. That's my understanding anyhow. And I think if our housing for seniors, for instance, was let out to another organisation that is a community housing provider, then those rents may even be cheaper because they would attract a government subsidy. So at the moment, you're right. I mean, a lot of our seniors, for instance, are to some extent subsidising those rental markets for our seniors.
Councillor.
Yes, it's a little bit of an aside, but actually in the moment, it looks like that subsidised payment from government may not actually be even continued, which has got a big impact on if we're looking at provision of senior housing through another provider, because it doesn't, at the moment, it doesn't look like it would be financial for them to even be involved.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Well, look, the fact that subsidy may not be continuing.
Oh, okay.
So that does make a big problem for our future with the whole housing strategy for using outside providers. So just have to hope that it does continue. At the moment, they're not saying that they will continue it.
I just want to ask a question. So where does the Department of Social Welfare come into this in terms of rent assistance towards people of low income? So
That's,
it's going to be there. It's not going away. I don't know how many millions the government spends every week on rent subsidies.
just saying this morning that they aren't going to continue.
Then there'll be lots of people out on the street. So
Yeah.
it'll continue. It's a ridiculous thing to say it won't. And I'm not saying you're a ridiculous thing. I'm saying.
Oh, no, thank you. No, it was the Shane Jones that did it.
So my question is how our ratepayers are subsidising effectively. What is a central government facility there to actually subsidise some of this? So because we keep the rates so low, these people in our houses don't then go to the Department of Social Welfare or whichever organisation does it to get a rent subsidy top up. So ratepayers are effectively subsidising central government.
And will not get a rent subsidy if they continue to live in council home.
That is another reason why we shouldn't be in it.
So then we'll come back to the right hand side. Councillor.
Well, I appreciate the conversation that's going around. I think that any more than the $10 per week rate would be unfair with the cost of living increases that have gone on. Especially, you know, like to be able to afford even your basic necessities with the amount that is being earned. And as a council, we sit here, and I know we're talking about money now, but we also have a social obligation. And so that is where this comes in. It's historical. We can't do anything about it over this enhanced annual plan. So I understand, but I believe that the council will continue to look at it.
I know we talk about it every.
And we talk about it every year, but to me, I just think that this kind of sits in the right place for it to be, you know, without it being a terrible burden on the people that live here don't have a lot. Okay, that's part of how they get in there, so.
So just further to Pip's point, just a reminder that we currently are talking about the fees and charges increase, not whether or not we should have social housing. And secondly, I guess going against my own first point, I swear that I have seen a survey or some such through council in this traineum that actually suggests that our community, by and large, are comfortable with that offsetting of costs for the fact that those that are living in our senior housing need to be there.
One cost that they don't tend to feel like is a burden.
Janice, then Aidan.
Through the chair, if you remember when we did the workshop before Christmas, this is one of the items that's on our work to investigate going forward for the long-term plan and the future. And obviously we're working with Councillor Macaulay with the housing strategy as well. So it's not disappeared off the radar.
Yes.
Aidan, Colin.
Thanks, Mayor Martin. Sorry, Charlie, what did you say that $10 increase per week is?
8%. Since 8%.
8%. Well, that's, I think that's an achievable level in spite of the struggles that are occurring at the moment. Just looking online, the New Zealand superannuation has increased by the CPI index of I know it's not 8%, but increased by 4.6%. So by keeping it down, I also think that our residents who are living in our pension or our senior housing, they've contributed to our communities over the years. We need to be providing, our society needs to be providing to be inclusive, to have people within the community, because they have provided so much to us in the past and continue to provide so much to us in the future.
Nice.
No, I didn't have anything.
Right, yeah. Okay, so I think that probably wraps that up. We've given that a good go. Boundaries to some extent. Things we've said before. Animal control, is there any more?
What page is that?
Page 14, page 36.
Proposing a 5% increase. So last year we did a 10% increase. This year, for affordability reasons, this is a 5%.
And if you remember that last year there was a catch up a little bit. Yeah.
I think we had the opportunity of 10 and 5 last year, didn't we? And we went with 10.
Just in relation to the dog, while we've got some increases in the registrations, I'm just wondering as to why there is no increase for the impound fees or other fees associated with the dog control space.
So that's a question.
Chair, thank you for the question, councillor. We have looked at in the past impounding fees in the past, but we don't believe should be an increase this.
I think the question is why not?
I think the argument from the community might be that we seem to be punishing good owners, i.e. those that register, but not those whose dogs are being impounded. And obviously dogs who are registered get impounded as well. Is there any feedback to that kind of argument that might come through, Russell?
Well, our officers always try to work with owners, specifically, but we don't, having looked at the topic in the past and updated, we don't see the need to make change this year, but, always open to further comment.
Yeah, I feel like the general fees, what they've gone up, I think that there could be an increase to the late fees as well. Instead of it being, you know, having gone up again, and I know it's only another 5%, but it's still 5%, and it did go up 10% last year. So it would have been good to perhaps have seen exactly what it would have been if instead some of those costs went to the late fees instead. For the dogs, because to me, it's, you know, that would be more of to be able to make sure everyone's paying on time. And that would be another place where it could go instead of on the dog impounding fees. But that's just, that hasn't been looked at, I don't believe, or was that considered?
Well, my question, I'll ask it through you, somebody, Janice, is that my understanding is that on average we impound about one dog a week at the most. I can't see how those fees can be anywhere near cost recovery. Can't even see how it covers the depreciation on the asset.
Are you talking about the impounding fees?
See comment.
I will pass to Russell, but my first comment would be that the pound is it's sustainably built, so it's using solar, it's using recycled water, so it doesn't have the same cost footprint that a non-sustainably built pound would have. But I'll pass to Russell.
It is also covered dogs, but not the owner.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of planning for the pound, took those opportunities to be as cost effective as we could in terms of modern equipment and off-grid nature, plus those factors that the CEO has just pointed out. But open to hear further comment as to if you see there is strong merit to increase the dog impound fees.
I'd argue against increasing the dog impounding fees. I don't think the point of the fees is to cover the entire cost of the investment of the pound. It's just to cover the cost of retention of the animal. And I think when we're talking about $200 or $300, that amount of money is enough to really push families over the edge. Yeah, I don't see that there'd be a lot of benefit in increasing that there. I think that the risk of increasing it would be actually causing harm to some families. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think my question is probably more for Russell. We're dog owners. I'm of the sound opinion that if you own a dog, you take responsibility for the costs. If you want the dog in your household, then it's like your child. You take responsibility for all the costs to it. The first impounding, see what Beck says about the 200-300. The first impounding, I think, could probably be a bit higher. And I was wondering, Russell, have you ever looked at different impound fees for registered dogs and unregistered dogs? So if they're unregistered, they get charged slightly more than the registered dog.
No, we haven't considered that, councillor. But it's something that we take to officers further consideration. The dogs as a roaming dog that need situation that needs impoundment, and that's the fee we've used.
Because I would have thought an unregistered dog would be harder to track down the owner, so it means someone's taking up more valuable time to track down the owner than with a registered dog.
It's a check. It's a good point. Woody?
Yes, no surprise I'm in Woody's camp here. Well, it might be a surprise, but yeah, look,
That's not good last year.
I have argued against low fees for impounding for 4 years now. And I totally agree with you, Woody. If you own a dog, it's your responsibility. And sorry, I'm not really concerned about the cost to a family if you don't secure your dog. Don't have the dog, don't have the animal, because actually the welfare of the animal is more important than you actually with your right to have an animal. And if you can't look after it, don't have it, or that's the cost. Sorry, this, we've spent, Jay, what was the cost of this pound? A hell of a lot of ratepayers' money to look after a few dogs that people don't look after. And that's what we're all talking about. We're not talking about the vast majority of people who look after their animals and care for their animals. We're talking about the very few in our community that don't do it. And why should we be sending a message, say, look after your animals.
Melissa will go, Colin will go, Matt.
Thank you. Just one comment in response, that accidents do happen, and sometimes very good owners or people who would consider themselves to be good owners do have their dogs get out, and I can put my hand up and say that that has happened to me on occasion. So it's not just bad owners whose dogs escape. And when we talked before about rubbish, we talked about our costs matching others. How do our impounding fees, do they sit sort of relative to our extended neighbours?
Knowing that you'd asked me that question, I just looked it up. So I can't speak to what they're going to approve for the 24-25, but for the current year, Casterton is 75 for first, 150 and 200. So first, second, third. Sorry, that was Masterton, and Casterton are 150 per animal for the first, 200 and 250. So they do have a higher. So Casterton have a
Carterton go higher first, but Masterton go lower and stack.
Even though somebody else is subsidising cars.
Can I just make one?
Yes, we'll go, you will go, Woody will go, Matt.
Yes, so just one further comment about what Melissa said. I'll come back. My dogs have escaped from my property occasionally. And the first thing I've done when this is in, some of you will have seen it over the years, I've gone on Facebook and I've got the community involved, and I've even rung the council and said, if you find my dogs, please up. Those dogs, when they get picked up, if you do that, they don't get impounded because the ranger already knows exactly whose dog it is and goes, I've got your dog, come grab it. So there's no impounding cost. It's actually about taking responsibility. And the community is really good because when the community knows, my Labradors have wandered across the river at Taraniko. Colin's probably seen Facebook posts and so on, and they turn up race course. But it's about taking responsibility, and that is part of it, is coming clean on losing the dog. It's the impounded dogs are the ones that people don't say anything, and the council doesn't know whose dog it is. That's what we're talking about. So when you say accidents happen, yes, they do, but it's not about the accidents, it's about the action that you take following the action that determines whether your dog's going to be impounded or not.
So,
Martin, I'll start with a question for Russell, for mine, if that's okay. Are there charges for people with walking around town with unleashed dogs? I'll carry on with this before you answer it, and I'll tell you why. So there's signs on the rail trail and greydown, dogs must be leashed. We went up there on the weekend, and the amount of dogs, people biking with them unleashed and walking with them unleashed, is quite incredible. And to the fact that my wife and her friend took our dog for a walk a month or so ago, who's always on a leash because you can't not let him on a leash because he thinks everyone's his friend. And another dog rushed him that wasn't on a leash, and because he thought it was a friendly dog, he actually tore that hard on his leg to go and see him. It actually snapped the collar off, and he took off. So, and I know a lot of these dogs are friendly and happy dogs, but it's the unintended consequence that comes from them, and whether or not rangers can actually go around to these areas where people tend to have the dogs and give them spot fines, and that start to make people realise that you can't just let dogs roam willy-nilly when there's kids and old people around and everything else.
I note the feedback and the advice from the community out there through the councillor's comment, but it's not something that officers do roving patrols on in terms of unleashed putting out unleashed dogs. So you've identified an area of focus, but then that impacts resources, of course, like everything.
But is there actually a bylaw in our policy or something in our policy that states that dogs have to be leashed in public?
Well, because we've got signs that say it.
Yeah, signs say it all over.
Who put the signs in?
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Council did.
Okay, so I'll.
Geez, I might get a chance to.
But I've been waiting for you. And you'll get so I don't accept the cost of depreciation as any lesser cost than any other aspect of running a facility. And in this case, it may well be more than the cost of electricity. So it's actually not something we obviously need to worry about. However, I just can't imagine that somebody complains about a dog running loose on the rail trail. Somebody comes out from, picks it up, takes it to Featherstone and pounds it, goes back to work. We've used much more than $80 already. I just don't accept that these costs here are anywhere realistic to recovering the cost. And I share Councillor Woodcock's, Councillor Plummer's views that, that this is something that dog owners need to be taking responsibility for. And when it comes to the actual discussion, I will move that we defer discussion on this until we've had assurance that the costs that we charge are something approximate to the costs of running the facility.
So, I feel that that's all, I'm sorry, Mayor Martin, but I feel like that's already been answered. Charlie's given the answer on where the other councils are already standing, and also Janice has explained about why our confidence for their already sits where it is. But what I was wondering was also, but in the past, and I'd just like to know the last time that council or the police actually went to the schools and stuff with regards to being around dogs and having dogs come towards them, because I think that's another big thing that comes through to the impounding, to these rushing dogs, to being attacked and things like that. And in the past, the police worked in conjunction with the council to be able to go out to the schools and do like some work with the children. And but we haven't heard any kind of update in that for a wee while. It's gone really silent, and I'd just like to know if council is still doing that with the police or on their own. I think that is something that's really important, is that we're doing that training as well around it. And I thought that was something that the dog controllers actually did, but I could be wrong, and it's the police now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of comments to make on that. There's a social component, obviously, with the dog pound. I think we discussed it at our rating review about a split, I guess, between user and community. And I think it's really important to recognise why we actually have dog pounds there. And if we increase our fees, I mean, it can impose some hardship on those, for instance, who love their animal, for instance, and all of a sudden have to find some money to get their dog out of the pound because it jumped the fence or it was spooked by something. I don't consider the fees to be unreasonable, but I take on board what people say, the actual cost of providing the service. So there is no doubt that there will be some cross subsidisation from ratepayers across the district, because at those fees, there certainly isn't a standalone or cost recovery unit. But I'm conscious of the social element that's attached to the impounding of dogs as well. And our rangers do a very good job. They generally don't impound, only as a last resort. So, yeah. So anyhow, I've had my say now. Thanks, boss.
Good.
Janice or Boss, does Boss have his hand up?
He's had your hand up for a while.
Oh, you go, Boss, I'll go next.
Well, no, I don't think I have had my hand up for a while, but thank you. Woody, I'm sorry about having the dog off the lead at the weekend. No, I didn't see you, boss. I got stopped on the rail trail by someone on a e-bike and roundly told off for doing so. Yeah, I did cop it. But I just think we should put the first impounding up. I think I would agree with pretty much the sentiments around the table that responsible dog owners are responsible, and for those that aren't, got to pay the price. sometimes if it's going to be, and I think, you know, I don't know why it's 80, 200 and 300, it should maybe 100, 200, 300, that would make more sense to me. But it goes up accordingly.
Two questions. First question, given the number of dogs that we impound per week and per year, would a minimal adjustment to the impounding fee, for argument's sake, $20? We're just talking such an overall minimal amount of money. It just doesn't really make sense to me. Second of all, if we were to defer this decision as the mayor suggested, we would then miss the 1 month required. Would that mean that we had to like not use these for the coming year, or would it mean that we had to extend our registration period? What would the impact be?
The registration period is set for July.
Set to the 31st of August in terms of payment, so we would miss the.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting any change to the dog registration protocol.
It's looked at.
Yeah, I'm only suggesting that we defer a decision on the impound fees until, I don't think we should give a subsidy to someone until we know how big that subsidy is. That's my view.
Can they be, with that in mind, can the animal control fees be separated out? So set the registration fees, but not set the impound fees? Can that be done?
There should be signal, if we need to signal to the public any intended changes and what the fees are for the forthcoming year. So,
I think the council is asking a legal question.
Can we set to further to Martin's point, are we legally able to set the registration fees now and then at a later date readjust the impound fees within the current year, or do we have to address the whole package of animal related fees in one go to allow the month notice?
my understanding is the whole.
Jack Dennis is just doing a reference check, so we'll.
Yeah, I haven't managed to have a talk all through this session. I just personally think we're spending so long on this small point. I was wondering, just to get it moving forward, could perhaps we have a vote on it just to get it settled? Because I think the majority of people are happy with what the staff have suggested. And it's just such a small amount. I just wonder if we would make a decision and move on.
Well, we're making the decisions in paper form.
No, this you adopt separately. So
Yes,
through the
yes.
chair, but this, if you want to
Oh, sorry,
change, change now.
Yes,
But
yes.
no, my apologies.
So whether we could
Yes.
say we don't, we go recommendation the staff have put forward? Because we've spent about half an hour on this one point.
Councillor Woodcock. Councillor.
I'm going to make one last plug against increasing the impounding fees, and to circle back to when we're talking about good dog owners and bad dog owners. I think to be a bad dog owner, there's like really quite specific criteria you have to hit around animal welfare issue, and I think everybody else just owns dogs. Obviously, some of them are service dogs, most of them are pets. If we're talking about, for example, a young family, a single mum, couple of kids and a dog, that's a really small setup for the demographic that we have here. And the dogs, you could call it a luxury item. You could also refer to it as a mental health strategy. The stuff that we have, the relationships that we have with our animals and how important they are. If we're in a situation where you've got a young family that isn't able to pay that first impounding fee and the effects that it has on that family, $80 is a really huge amount to a lot of people, and increasing that to whatever we land on risks causing really a lot of harm to some people. And I think, you know, it's all very well and good to say, well, we have to be able to recover our costs and, you know, that's fine. But I think we just all need to be quite comfortable with the level of harm that that could potentially cause.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems to bring that to an end. Is there anything else about animal child? It's not. So in that case, let us move on to planning and resource management. So we're looking at pages 17 to 20.
Can I just ask where we landed up with fees and charges of dogs, because there's some debate over the impounding.
Yeah, we will come to vote on it.
Yes, exactly.
We're voting on this.
We wanted a bit of a steer though, otherwise it would come out. I mean, that's what you suggested.
Well, I think we've all heard the discussion and we can come to the knowledge of this. I will move it then.
I just have a question with regards to the planning, but which completely skips over the food, alcohol, gambling, noise and other bylaws. And I'd just like to know why the alcohol licensing for the license applications and the manager's certificates doesn't have the amount. And just says as per act, when there is an actual set fee that needs to be paid for your manager's license and for, so I'm a little bit confused.
Through the chair, because they're specified in legislation, so if they change in legislation, we follow the act. We don't set the fee, the act does.
So what is set now could change tomorrow.
If the act changes.
The act is going through Parliament.
Right. Okay, that's all. I just wanted to clarify, because there are a lot of people wondering why we haven't put it in there.
Because it'll probably change, but it will change if the act is passed.
So it's a central government fee. Yeah, public, great.
So we come to planning and resource management. It's page 17 in little fonts and 39 in large fonts. What would we like to make the point here? Quite a few.
So this was the one that I queried earlier with regards to the private plan change applications and why such a large increase there from 150 to $650 plus that. So for the section 176A outline plan waiver, first hour is free, each subsequent is 200. Those both look like possible new fees because it's not showing anything being changed there. And then with the consent notice, it's gone from $115 to $650. So I'm just wondering. So in fact, that could possibly, you know, be $850 if the 200's a new fee as well.
Have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of section 221 consent notice, we had in earlier versions of the fees brochure, we actually had that has subsequently dropped off, so it's a recapture of that figure. The 650 is used, so and that 650 reflects the amount of work involved in an officer's time to deal with the consent notice, so it's a recapture of the figure.
And through the chair, it is standard practice for plan changes to be largely at the applicant's cost, not in the normal planning space where you are looking at the public good part of the planning. But if you're looking at a plan change, they can be very costly, and they're generally at the applicant's cost or significantly at the applicant's cost, which is why this is 650.
So that's where the increases come from 115 to 600.
As Russell said, it's the amount of time it takes to work on a plan change.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you.
My one's not actually one that's marked in yellow. I'll just, Russell, under certification and plan change, there's a $20,000 fee. What is the plan change entitled, and why is the fee $20,000?
Which page?
Same page.
Same page, just
Page 40.
40.
18 or 40, whichever number you're looking at.
Yeah, it's not an asterisk, but
It's got an asterisk there. I'm not sure what that asterisk means.
They the bonds that you hold, because it says denotes minimum fee deposit, all other fees.
Yeah,
It's an asterisk number, and on page 39, the asterisk says denotes minimum fee deposit.
So it's the deposit.
well, that's the problem. It's 20 grand, it's still that's deposit.
I just wondered, just why Russell's looking, I just wonder that if it's deposit / bond, because I know when we did the work on our house, we had to pay a bond that sits with council until the work's finished. So, and it's a large number like that.
councillor, plan changes are extensive pieces of work involving rezoning and the justification around rezoning small or large portions of land. And across the country, those figures are generally very high to recognise both the time, complex nature of the justification for the rezone, and SSE plan changes more often than not. It's a privately driven desire to get zoning change, make opportunity for land zoning changes, and that figure reflects what you find across the country. And we believe it's right.
Sorry, just to ask, answer possibly more directly your question there, councillor Sedler, is the asterisk at the top of the section says denotes the minimum fee deposit. And that all other fees are fixed, so that 20,000 has the asterisk.
So I was just going to not ask a question, just make a comment on 0.4 planning and resource management, and actually 0.5 building consents and PIMs, that I'm actually comfortable with the recommended costs purely based on the fact that those two sections are you know, they're private actions that the user pays. If I choose to do something on my property or develop, then it seems right that I would pay the associated, and that would cover the cost of time. So I'm quite comfortable with what's been implemented.
Yeah, bottom of that page, 18 or 40. Staff time per hour has gone from $150 to $200. Does that mean the staff have had a 33% pay increase, or is that just hasn't gone up for 20 years, or?
No, it's not there, unfortunately, for the pay increase. It reflects the professional nature of the work undertaken. It's a benchmark that's done across the other councils. We believe that $150 is a low figure for professional work undertaken, and the $200 figure is used. Council roles really gave us the thought on benchmark and reflect this with other councils. Steer our fees, and just as example, Marston District Council, the hourly rate for a planner is $198, and for a senior planner undertaking work $238. So we believe it's timely to reflect the professional nature of the work involved, and that's why we're moving to 200.
Can't argue with that point. So I suppose I just thought I'd like to say I'm in the wrong business and I want to sell my diggers and take on planning.
Never too late. Okay, the other questions on the topic of building consents and PIMs. Okay, the last one there is roading, and do we have any queries? The user said that we on page 17 to 20, but I haven't quite identified them yet. So the issue of those spray areas, what is the well,
It's at page 49 in the big number.
Okay.
No spray area.
Yes, 39. What?
No, the no spraying areas, and install additional per peg is raised from $25 to $50.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Just as a general, point, you'll notice that, in talking with the team, we made a decision not to increase any costs overall this year. That reflects the fact that, just sort of listening to community and commercial tolerance for a lot of these costs, a lot of them being traffic management and access costs. Not to say we won't revisit that next year, but for the next 12 months, we increase charges. The no spraying areas, that's just a sign, it's a sign cost. We don't do many of those a year, but the cost of producing those signs and fixing them has gone up, so we're just reflecting that costs.
And that relates to people who don't want chemical spray on their booms. Is that a no spray?
Actually, it's with that council cost where we need to enforce a no spraying policy in a certain area.
So we're not, that wouldn't be a charge to anybody.
Another one for Stefan. The rapid numbering's gone from $50 to $150. Almost 3 times. Two of you, or?
I don't know the answer to that.
That if you want.
Yes, thank you.
That's one that I've been asking for many years as to what's involved, what work is involved in that. And that actually does involve 2 visits to the property. Firstly, to measure the distance of the property to the road and ascertain the details that need to be on that rapid number registration, and then a revisit to go and fix the sign up, and then obviously the cost of the sign. So $50 was probably far too low for far too long in terms of cost recovery. So that's been put up to reflect that.
A little bit of caution in general, it seems to me that people broadly accept increases in costs in line with whatever's happening generally much more readily than they accept the 50 to 50. So if it had gone from 50 to 70 to 90 over an X year period, nobody would even think that. But when it goes like this, people get a shock and they don't come back and say, thank you for keeping it so low for so long.
No, they don't.
Right, experience.
Could we, one that's just sort of with bypass, sorry, on page 27 on the big numbers, information requests, Lagoimas. And we've just had a conversation about how much it costs for staff time at $200 an hour. And yet for Lagoimas, we charge $38 for half an hour for staff time. So
Which page was that last time?
page 27 or 5, small 5, big 27. It's the first one of the fees and charges, I think. And I've got to say that the two don't seem to gel. If our staff time is valued at $200 an hour, then that's what we should be charging, because the law actually says fair and reasonable charges.
Amy?
As per the ministry system guidelines, that's how we apply our charging policy, and that's what it says in that policy.
Council, so I was trying to think in my head, the Ministry of Justice already be on it. But yes, the Ministry of Justice have put out guidelines for a long time.
But will they pay the difference?
Will they pay?
Can we send them the bill, the difference between $38 half an hour and 100?
That's a good point.
Well, that's the point though, isn't it?
Through the chair though, we do have the ability, if the Lagoima is going to take a significant amount of work, then we can hold the Lagoima and advise the person that it's going to cost an amount of money to do it. So we don't always just respond to a Lagoima. If it's unclear, we will ask for clarification, ask them to narrow scope, make them aware that there will be a cost. And many times I've seen them withdraw the Lagoima or narrow it down to a very specific question to bring it within the half an hour.
Well, I think we
I don't
need to raise that. That's
raise any invoices for Lagoimas Certainly not since I've been here.
Through you, Chair, it's been mentioned, we use this tool predominantly. So those are the boilers which we take as time, we indicate the maximum amount of time that it would take, which is usually quite extensive for that type of boiler. So we're not talking just a couple of hours. Some of the boilers that we get can be days to go through some of the information, and that's the
Argue my point even more.
Yeah, we would give it to the individual, and at that point, it's their decision whether they change the lid boiler or withdraw the lid boiler, or go ahead with it.
And pay the invoice.
Yeah, very seldom is it invoiced for a small amount of time. We tend to recommend to our officers that it's around about an hour's worth of work per boiler.
Is it enforced?
When was the last time we charged someone for it?
So we would on a regular basis assess the amount of time it takes for the boilers. Get the boilers through pretty much every day. We assess every single one of them. Most of them, the information is pretty easy to find and access and respond to. In the guidelines, we are restricted in that we can't really charge for redacting information. We can't charge for that initial assessment time. So the only time that we can actually charge for is the time it takes officers to find the information and collate it. A lot of the boilers that come through often are repetitive, in which case the proactive release policy is great to have because we refer them simply to the website for that information. And then I think I've had a couple recently come through where we are assessing currently the amount of time it would take, and we're looking at days.
Okay, that doesn't change the underwriting issue here, it is labelled staff time. Staff time, as Woody just accurately raised, is not $38 an hour, or $38 half an hour.
But through the chair, it was already clarified that that's what's in the guidance and that's what we should follow.
Does the guidance give a figure, or does it say fair and reasonable?
Yeah, it's $38 as we got fees and charges there.
But then that is on guidance, isn't it? It's only guiding. There's no requirement like some of those other fees that are specified within legislation, like the liquor licensing and the manager license fees, which actually specifies what that dollar value is. It's the $38 for half an hour is a guidance. So can't we take the guidance into consideration and set what we believe is fair and reasonable?
Through the chair, I think we have to go back to the purpose of what LAGOIMA is, and the Ombudsman will look very unfavourably on us if we are having prohibitive fees in here that stop people from accessing information. So if the guidance is saying $38 an hour, we would calculate how much time it would take, or any other additional resource that we would have to bring in to answer the LAGOIMA, and that becomes a chargeable cost. But you have to be able to demonstrate to the Ombudsman, if you're doing that, why you've done what you've done. And as has already been said, in most cases, if you go back to the person with the LAGOIMA and say, this is going to cost you $3,000, they will change their scope. They will narrow their field, or they will withdraw the LAGOIMA and come back with something later. So
however, in this training already, we've already implemented the process of proactive response. So which has been, and I believe that would be viewed positively by the Ombudsman or the Justice Department or whatever, because therefore this council is taking some responsible action to reduce the number of LAGOIMAs as opposed to restrict and prevent people from receiving information from the organisation. However, I agree with Alistair, that fee is very, very small compared to what our staff time is.
I don't think if you're planning to get $200 an hour.
I think further to Janice's point though, is that when used properly, LAGOIMA is a process that our community should be able to have good free access to, because it shouldn't take a huge amount of time. And I don't think that we should be moving in a direction that makes that process prohibitive just because we do have a few vexatious LAGOIMA requesters that are making this process hard. Ultimately, the processes for the access of information that we should be able to give.
My point was staff costs are staff costs.
Yeah, but I think the ombudsman is clear that that actually it's about the free giving of information, and actually we should only be.
Transparency.
Yeah, right.
So if we can go to councillor Ford, wait a wee while and then councillor.
Yes, I think quite a good point. I mean, it really is a sort of basis of democracy that people should have the access to some information, and we're just biased because of the ones we get. But I think if we didn't follow the advice or recommendation we've been given, we'd immediately have a whole lot of complaints from people who'd be well aware of that. And also, I think that the way the staff are handling it is very, very good, as it's handling the vexatious ones in a very good way that's actually cut right down to make them smaller inquiries. And so I think that we've got the right kind of balance there of fairness and looking after democracy, but also reducing the amount of work on the staff with ridiculous requests. So I think it's the way it is.
Councillor.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree with Kay and some others. It's more a service that we should provide to the public than something we should be trying to raise from as such. Yes, I'm more than happy with the charges that are there.
Perhaps we shouldn't call it staff costs, call it something different.
Well, indeed, we don't. Yeah, I agree. I think it might be better to say the $38 per
Investigation costs.
And I think one of the other things that Councillor Plymouth sort of hints at is that there are actually variable staff costs in here, but it's not as if everything else is a consistent figure. And I wonder, therefore, if staff costs don't sometimes include the fact that in order for the staff to do their job, they will use a vehicle, whereas for other things, they don't use a vehicle. I'm just not sure of that. And it may be something at some point where it would be useful to, in fact, have a consistent charging regime so that we know why it's some.
Something different.
Anyone else? You picked up anything else? Okay, well, in that case, what I think.
Right, can I just have one more thing, just not about that, about one of the others on page 43 in the big numbers. Another question for Russell. The fee for large farm sheds is $1,474, which is $200 more than a garage with a sleep out, and the garage and sleep out actually needs more inspections. So large farm shed, that I would think would be a far simpler thing to get through the system than a sleep out and garage costs so much more.
We have in the background other managers, so I don't want to give an inaccurate advice in response to a question. We have Sarah in the background who might give a specific answer on that. I think that would be wise.
That'd be cool.
The hours of processing and the number of inspections, do you think? Because there is a difference between the garage and sleep out.
Yes, I mean, the garage is an extra inspection, which is quite some money when the person's got to go out there and inspect it, yet it's cheaper than the farm shed. That only needs 2 inspections and are quite simple to inspect, to be fair, generally, unless there's added extras to them.
Longer time to walk around.
Well, yeah.
$10,000.
So I just find it's quite expensive just to slap, want to put a hay shed up in the middle of a paddock, you know.
Right, did you have your microphone on?
Can you just ask Sarah? Sarah, are you online?
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
Do I have to ask the question again, do I? Yeah.
No, that's okay. I heard the question. So generally, so you can build up to, I think it's 100 square meters on a farm without needing a building consent. So when we say larger farm sheds, we're talking about quite significant sized farm sheds, which do take a little bit longer when it comes to the processing, which is why there's, that extra hour for processing that's involved in that as well.
processing costs more than inspections. 'Cause we'll sit
Yes,
with-
it does. Yep. So we have an hourly rate for processing, and inspections are based on, I think it's 75% of the hourly rate
Right,
is what our inspection cost is.
right, no, good goal, thanks, Sarah.
Any last minute questions on Sarah's online?
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah.
There being none, we come now to recommendation 2, which is to adopt the fees and charges. This again explains. I'm just going to, you did some research there a wee while back, I think, on animal control.
No, impounding fees can be set at any time. It's the registration fees that have to be set by 1 July.
So the recommendation here is adopt the fees and charges for 2024 to 25, which are in appendix 1. Do I have them? I do. Councillor Olds. Do I have a seconder? I do. Councillor Sadler Fotter. Do you wish to talk, Councillor Olds?
I'm fine, I think the discussion's going well.
No, nothing further to add.
I wish to move an amendment that the fees and charges for impoundment be deferred until we've had some further advice from the Chief Executive. Do I have a second? I do, Councillor Wood. So just briefly to the amendment, as I say, I just repeat that I don't think the costs we're charging there bear very much resemblance to what I think are the realistic fees. If we are going to subsidise, then I think we do need to know how much the subsidy actually is. I don't believe there's a great deal of work involved in actually doing a little accounting here and getting the figures together. So I think we're better informed. You wish to speak to the amendment? Anybody else? And the process here is that if the amendment gets carried, then it becomes part of the substantial motion. So I'll put the amendment, which is we defer the decision on fees. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. That's lost. Okay. Any further discussion on the substantive unamended motion? It's not, therefore we'll put that. All in favour of adopting the fees and charges as per appendix 1, please say aye. Against, no. Any abstentions or wish to report it? There are not. So that brings paper 3 to an end. When will lunch be available?
Lunch is.
Yeah.
Actually.
So this might make a sensible time, I think, we have an adjournment.
Yep.
Okay, well, we will take advice on when to start the adjournment, but it will be. You think we should?
You don't now,
Yeah.
because once you start this, you don't want to really.
Okay, right. Okay, so how long do you think you need?
You went then 45?
Okay, 45 minutes, we adjourn.
Oh, nothing's gone out.